I love monthly wrap-ups. I love watching them, and I love being able to talk about every book I read in a month. But I do feel like filming them can get a little repetitive. They are always the same, at least for me, just like the standard sit-down video. So I wanted to switch it up a little bit today and just do a more casual monthly wrap-up. So I'm gonna sit and do my makeup and get ready while I talk to you guys about every book I read in October. For my stats this month, I read 10 books total, 1 romance, which is crazy for me, 5 romanticises. Literally, who am I? I fully was in my romantasy era this month. I could not get enough. Normally I am not super into them, but now I think I've become addicted. And I also read 3 YA dystopians. Take a wild guess what they were. Starting with the only romance, I read Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. This is actually an audio only novella, and as much as I love Ali Hazelwood, I actually don't read her novellas. I tried to read, I don't know, 1 or 2 of them, I forget when they came out, and I just like wasn't really super into it. I'm not really a novella person in general, but the premise of this one sounded really interesting and I just love her, so I wanted to give it a shot. The 2 love interests in this work for rival video game companies, and there's this book adaptation game that they're working on, and both companies want to do it because that will result in the best game, but they don't like each other. They all have rivalries. There's like exes and ex-best friends and ex-bosses and coworkers and stuff, and just basically everyone in each company hates somebody else in the other company. And so as like a team building exercise, they go to this cabin in the woods, very snowy, like ski lodge. The female main character doesn't like the male main character because she overheard him saying something not nice about her once, so obviously she doesn't like him now. But they all end up in this cabin, obviously whatever, trying to work out their differences. And I didn't love this. It definitely wasn't awful, like I didn't hate it, but I just didn't really care. At first I was really into it. I liked the premise and where the story was going, but then like halfway through I just stopped caring, kind of. I did really like the setting. Very cozy, perfect for this time of year, snowy, makes you want to drink hot chocolate in your pajamas. I'm also using the viewfinder as my main mirror, so this might not be my best makeup look. And the couple was pretty cute. They're very Ali Hazelwood cut and paste. All her couples are very similar, but I do always like them. I don't know, I can't really put my finger on why I didn't love this. I just wasn't obsessed, but like I said, it wasn't bad. I still enjoyed it. It just is not a favorite of mine. And I found myself wishing that I could read it instead of listen to the audiobook. I don't know if I just wasn't vibing with the narrator or if it being on audiobook just made it drag out a little bit for me. I'm not sure, but I do kind of wish I could have just read it. I think I would have enjoyed it more. Then I did a Hunger Games reread, and you guys are probably so tired of hearing me talk about the Hunger Games. I'm so sorry. Well, I'm actually not, because they're the best books ever, and I'm not gonna yap on about the Hunger Games, like, please. I know, we all know, we get it, I understand that, but I did do a reread because I got the illustrated version of the Hunger Games that they just came out with, and I actually show it in a vlog that I think is gonna be up before this, so if it is up, I'll put it up somewhere. But it was so gorgeous. If you are a Hunger Games fan, I definitely would recommend buying it. I think it was worth it. I'm not usually a huge special edition person, but that one definitely I loved, and I think it's worth it. So obviously when it came in the mail, I had to do a Hunger Games reread and look at the pictures, the illustrations, while I read it. So that's what I did. And honestly, I was just gonna read the first one to look at the illustrations, but obviously I can't do that. I ended up having to reread the entire series. I didn't reread The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but I read the original trilogy, and they just truly are the best books ever. If you've either never read them or never reread them as an adult, maybe you read them when you were younger, would definitely recommend. They hold up so well. They hold up way better than most of the books that came out in that era, in my opinion. So definitely give them a read. Sorry, it's election day, so my friends and I are talking about it, and I have a stomachache thinking about it. But this is when I entered my romantasy era. So I reread Fourth Wing because I really wanted to read Iron Flame. I actually started rereading Iron Flame. You'll notice that Iron Flame is not in this video, but I started reading Iron Flame and I made it like 25% of the way through, and I just like could not remember anybody's names or like what was going on. I just was not into it. So I decided to reread Fourth Wing to refresh my memory, and I was like, oh, I'll reread Fourth Wing and then I'll be super into Iron Flame and I'll finish it. I did not. Iron Flame, if you don't know, I'm sure you do because it's like one of the most popular books of the last few years, but it's basically Divergent with dragons. They go to this war college for dragon riders, and the main character was supposed to be a scribe, which is like the historians and librarians of this world, and then she ends up at this dragon college, and it's really dangerous. People die all the time. It's like a big deal to be a dragon rider. It's not like funny haha. She's like, oh great, I'm gonna die. And then her dragon is bonded with this other dragon, and the rider of that dragon is her enemy because their parents were on opposite sides of this war. So they hate each other, but it's also a romance, so you know the vibes. And I actually do think Fourth Wing is pretty good. I don't think it's the best book ever, like Nobel Prize winning literature, but I do think it's fun. I think I gave it 4 stars both times I read it, and it is fun and easy to read. I get why so many people love it a lot, honestly. But yeah, that did not help me get through Iron Flame, so I need someone to tell me if it's worth it or not, honestly. I just cannot get through it for some reason. I was slogging through it. I feel like it took me a week to read 25% of that book. I don't know what was going on. So if you have read Iron Flame, let me know if it's worth it and if it gets better, because honestly, I am not super into it. But I am glad that I reread Fourth Wing, because now if I do read it, I actually know what's going on and I remember all the characters. So it wasn't a total loss. Then my next read was Metal Slinger, and this is what really got me into my romantasy era. Like I said, I was never a huge romantasy person before. I have read some, obviously. I read Fourth Wing, I read the first few Throne of Glass books, I read the first ACOTAR book. So I had read some, I just never really got it. I didn't love them as much as I felt like so many other people love romantasy books. I didn't fully get the hype. And then I read Metal Slinger. So the synopsis for Metal Slinger is that in this world there are 2 countries. I guess they're countries, I don't know. Do you call it something different when it's a fantasy book? But there are these 2, I'm just gonna call them countries, but there are 2 countries and they used to live together, and then there was some sort of conflict, and the one people, the Kenta, banished the Alaha, I think it's Alaha, they banished them to a life on the water. So they're not allowed to step foot on land. They live in this really cool tree-like island, except for every year they have this festival and the Alaha are allowed to come on land and join the market. It's like a market, so that they can buy what they need for the coming year. And the main character is training to be a guard, and this is the first year that she has been allowed to go and visit land. So they go to this market and something ends up happening that puts their peace treaty at risk. They have a peace treaty, and that's how they're allowed to go to this market. But they put that at risk, and the main character gets in like a little brawl sort of with this man, one of the Kenta. And so that happens, and now everybody's like scrambling. They're like, what are we gonna do? This has international implications. The peace treaty's at risk. And then this stranger from Kenta shows up. And that is just the beginning of the book. Like the entire synopsis is only the very beginning, like the first 20%. And the book really goes from there. And I don't want to get into it anymore because I went in blind just reading the synopsis. And so I had no idea really where this book was gonna go. And I think it's so much more fun that way. So I don't want to get into what happens after that, but that's like the very basic plot. And this book was so good. This is the book that made me go, okay, I get the fantasy girls. I get why they love these books so much and why they're so exciting and why people really love them, and what made me be like, okay, I need to read more of these. There was so much going on in this book. Really, from page 1 you were just thrust right into it, and I really liked that. And then as the story goes on, you're getting the politics and the geography and the magic system and all of that. I think the author did a really good job of world building and not just throwing all the information at you at once in the beginning, which I appreciate, because I feel like sometimes in fantasy authors do that and then it's just really overwhelming. And as someone who doesn't read fantasy that much, it's easy to follow and understand. It's not super complicated, which again I appreciate, because like I said, fantasy can be overwhelming. I loved the main characters, I loved the romance, and guys, when I tell you this book had the most insane cliffhanger, I'm still not over it. I've actually thought about it every day since I finished this book. I was gagged, like truly. I cannot wait for the second book to come out. I followed the author on TikTok and we're actually mutuals now, so love you, Rachel. And she posted that she's halfway through writing the second book, so I'm so hoping that we get that soon, or as soon as possible. I know you don't write a book overnight, but I'm just so excited for the second one to come out and to see where the story goes, because that ending was crazy. And then like I said, that fully put me into my romantasy era, because I finally was like, okay, I get it, I'm here, I understand, I'm ready to be a romantasy girl. So I actually did a reading vlog where I read romantasy books for a week, and then the first few books I read for that video was the Powerless trilogy. Well, it's 2 books out of the trilogy and then a spin-off novella. Powerless follows Caden, is that their ship name? Powerless follows Payden and Kai, and in their world there are elites, which are people who have magical powers, and there are ordinaries, who are people who don't. And in this world, the king has made it illegal for you to be an ordinary. So if you are an ordinary and they catch you, you either get banished or you get killed. So Payden is an ordinary, but she fakes being an elite because she tricks people into thinking that she's a psychic, and she does this just by using a Sherlock Holmes type by power. Like, she just reads people very well and she uses that to make people think she's psychic. And she's living on the streets and she has a run-in with the prince, who is Kai, and he is the enforcer. So it is his job to get rid of all the ordinaries. So pretty much the worst person in the world that she could run into. But she ends up saving his life, and so they nominate her for the trials that they do. It happens every 5 or 6 years, I think, and it's like 3 rounds. Just, it's the Hunger Games basically, but whatever, we'll get into that. And there's 3 different trials and the winner gets like fame and glory and whatever. So she ends up in these trials even though she actually doesn't have any powers, and that's where my issues begin with this book. My main issue really is that the first trial is quite literally the Hunger Games. I said this in my vlog, so I am repeating myself a little bit, but it is quite literally the Hunger Games. It's like not even inspired by, it is the same thing, copy paste. It's actually crazy. I know that I have read the Hunger Games a million times and I did just reread them before I reread this, which I'm sure doesn't help, but when I tell you they're exactly the same, they're exactly the same. She's literally walking around the woods with a bow and arrow, eating squirrels. He gets injured and they team up, and it's literally the same thing. So that really turned me off. I actually originally started reading this when it came out last year, I think, and DNF'd it because the Hunger Games thing was pissing me off. So I didn't love that. Also, the final trial is very Goblet of Fire. They're in like this enchanted maze and it's a ripoff of Goblet of Fire too. So I didn't love that, I have to be honest, which sucks because I actually do like the vibe of the series and I think I could have liked it a lot if that aspect of the writing wasn't there. I love a castle setting. She's at the castle. I do like the trial idea. I liked Peyton and Kai. They have an enemies to lovers energy, very bantery, but yeah. It just felt like books I had already read being rewritten. Like Throne of Glass meets Hunger Games meets Harry Potter. I've also heard it's very similar to Red Queen, but I haven't read that, so I can't say. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Still had a pretty good time. It was fun, entertaining, popcorn book, but not a favorite. And then Reckless, the sequel, y'all, the most filler book ever. I'm not gonna get into the actual plot because that'll spoil the first one, but actually nothing happens in this book. I thought the plot of that entire book was gonna be the first 10% and then we were gonna move on. No, it was actually the entire book. Why am I holding this like a cigarette? No, it was actually the entire book. So that was annoying. And the second book is very heavily Peyton and Kai. There isn't really a ton of other characters or other plot going on. It's mostly just them. And so I think I did get tired of their dynamic after a while, because at this point it had been like 500 pages of them just bantering and, you know, whatever, we hate each other but we want each other. I kind of was just like getting tired of it at that point, and it was just like too much because there wasn't anything to balance it out with. So that was definitely not my fave. I think I gave it 2.5 stars, maybe 3. I did like the ending, and I think the setup for book 3 is really good, and I will read it because I'm interested to see how everything plays out. But that book just could have been done in like 50 pages. It did not need to be dragged out like that. And then I also read the novella Powerful, which is about Peyton's best friend Adina, and you do see her in the series, but she's not like a main character. She's very background. You don't really know a lot about her. So I did enjoy getting her backstory. This again, I just feel like was kind of boring. I liked the characters. I really liked the love interest in this a lot, and I hope he appears in the actual series in the 3rd book. But the beginning I thought was just slow, and it did pick up a little bit, but oh my god, did I not set my other eyelid? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this because maybe I can't multitask. But yeah, the beginning just dragged, and then I did think it picked up towards the end, but I don't know. I don't really have strong feelings on this either way. I think if you love the series, definitely read it, but I don't think you're missing that much if you skip it. Basically, she's a seamstress and he needs an outfit made for something, and so that is how they team up, and it's while Peyton is staying at the castle for the trials. So he hires her, and that's how they get to know each other, and there's romance and all that jazz. The last book I read in October was Heartless Hunter. This is another romantasy. I feel like I need to do my eyeliner while I'm not talking. There was no way I could do that while talking and not mess up. So Heartless Hunter kind of has a similar dynamic to Powerless actually, except in this world it's witches. So witches and humans lived together in harmony, and then the current king, I forget what they call it, I guess purged, I think is what they call it, all the witches. So he killed them all. And so same thing, you're not allowed to be a witch. If they find out you're a witch, you know, you get killed. And the main female character in this is a witch, and the love interest is part of the Blood Guard, and they are the people who hunt witches. So she's a witch and he's a witch hunter. Guys, I loved this book. I should have said in the beginning. And so she's actually a witch vigilante. She goes and she finds other witches and tries to help them escape, and they call her the Crimson Moth. So she's this like socialite by day and vigilante by night, and he has been trying to hunt down the Crimson Moth for like 2 years. So he gets a whiff that it might actually be her. Her name's Rune, and his name is Gideon. So Gideon gets a tip that the Crimson Moth might actually be Rune, and Gideon is Rune's best friend's brother, who's also a boy. So Gideon gets a tip that Rune might be the Crimson Moth, and he's like, no way, she's just this dumb socialite. But he has to investigate it, so he starts courting her, and she knows that he's onto her, so she starts courting him back because he's trying to get closer to her and she's trying to throw him off her trail. Of course, they start to develop some real feelings. I'm actually obsessed with this book. I loved it so much. First of all, just the world, the aesthetic, the vibe, everything about this I loved. It's witchy and it's sort of Bridgerton-esque, the way the courting goes and just the way everything was described. She lives in this beautiful house on the water. I just was obsessed with the aesthetic of this book and the vibe and the setting. The tension between them is insane because obviously you have, you know, the tension of he's quite literally hunting her down, and they're both playing each other, but they both like each other, and there's also tension because of the best friend and the brother. It was just so good. That's what I'm saying. I understand why the girls love romantasy so much, because it's so fun to have a romance with high stakes. As much as I love contemporary romances, it's annoying when it's an enemies to lovers and then he just like said he didn't like her t-shirt or something and now they hate each other. That irks me. So it's so fun to have actual high stakes and actual tension, and like these people literally want to kill each other. Like, I don't know, it makes it so much better. I also thought the magic system in this book was really interesting. In order for the witches to cast spells, they use runes, but the runes have to be in blood, and so that's how they originally identified witches, is witches would cut themselves and use their blood to cast spells, and they would have all these scars. And so she's also trying to not ever cut herself because she doesn't want to have the markings, and I just thought that was really interesting. I've never read anything like that with the blood and the runes. I just thought it was really cool, and this was just too good. Like, honestly, I was obsessed, giggling, kicking my feet. I really loved it. Although I keep doing this to myself, I need to stop reading books where the series isn't finished. Metal Slinger, Powerless, and Heartless Hunter. Now I have to wait till next year to read more, and I just want to know what happens now. Overall, this was just a really fun reading month for me. I definitely felt like I was getting in a rut with contemporary romance. Obviously, I love them so much. I will probably never stop reading them, but just when you read so many of them, and for me, I know what tropes I like and what I gravitate towards, so I tend to read a lot of books that are very similar, and it was just really nice to switch it up and read something different, and now I have this whole new genre open to me that I wouldn't have read before. So if you guys have any romantasy recommendations, please comment them, because I definitely am going to keep reading them. And if you've read any of the books I talked about in this video, let me know what you thought, if you liked them, if you hated them, if you agree with me, if you don't, and let me know if you liked this style of wrap up, if you like this, if you like the regular sit down videos instead. If you have any other ideas, let me know. I thought it was fun to switch it up, but I'm open to anything. I just want to talk about books. All my other socials will be down below as always if you want to find me anywhere else, and thank you so much for watching.